Wounds are doors that light uses to enter. The knife entered 3 times, once in the chest, twice in the back. And when Lucas collapsed on the cold floor of that dark alley at 22 years old, he didn't think about the physical pain. He thought he was dying without ever having truly lived. But that wasn't the worst wound he carried, the invisible weight that no one saw. You know that kind of pain that doesn't bleed, the kind that doesn't leave a visible mark on the skin, but corrodes everything inside like silent rust? Lucas knew that kind of wound well. Since he was 12, when his father left home and never returned, the boy learned to build walls around his heart. High walls, thick walls, walls that didn't let anyone in, but that also didn't let anything out. He grew up believing that feeling was synonymous with weakness, that crying was for weak people, that asking for help was admitting defeat. So he kept everything inside, the anger, the sadness, the fear, the loneliness. He kept it like someone burying a treasure, thinking that one day it would have some value. But buried wounds don't heal, they rot. And that's how Lucas reached 22 years old, alive on the outside, but dead on the inside. The night that changed everything. That Friday night began like so many others. Lucas was leaving work, tired, exhausted from carrying bricks all day on a construction site. His body ached, but it was a familiar pain, almost comforting. At least he understood this pain. At least this one had a clear reason. On his way home, 3 men approached him. They wanted his cell phone, his wallet, the little he had. Lucas, driven by an impulse he didn't even understand, reacted. Maybe it was tiredness, maybe it was accumulated anger, maybe it was just the unconscious desire to finally feel something real, even if it was pain. The first stab came quickly, the second right after, the third when he was already falling. And there, on that dirty floor, with blood running down and life slipping through his fingers, something extraordinary happened. For the first time in 10 years, Lucas cried. It wasn't a silent cry, it was a deep, visceral cry, as if all the tears he had swallowed for a decade finally found a way out. And along with the tears came memories, the absence of his father, the nights his mother cried in secret, the younger brother he never knew how to help, the dreams he buried because he believed he didn't deserve them. When darkness becomes a teacher. Someone called the ambulance. The paramedics arrived in time. At the hospital, while the doctors stitched his body, Lucas made a discovery that no college in the world teaches. Sometimes we need to break to understand where we were cracked. During the 17 days of recovery, locked in that white hospital room, he had something he had never had before. Time. Time to think. Time to feel. Time to realize that he had been running away from himself for so long that he didn't even know who he was anymore. It was his mother who brought the first ray of light. Sitting beside the bed, holding his hand, she said something simple, yet devastatingly profound. "Son, do you know why I never gave up on you? Because I know your wounds aren't you. They're just places where life is still trying to teach you something." Those words entered his ears and went straight to somewhere inside him that had been locked away for years, and something began to move, like a rusty door that finally gives way after decades of being closed. The anatomy of transformation. Have you ever noticed how a tree grows? When it encounters a stone in its path, it doesn't stop growing. It goes around it, it adapts, it transforms the obstacle into part of its own structure. And often, it's these trees, the ones that grew around the stones, that become the strongest, the most interesting, the most beautiful. We're like that, or at least we can be. Lucas began to understand that his wounds were not flaws to be hidden, but marks of battles he had survived. Each scar was evidence that he was stronger than the moments that tried to destroy him. His father's absence, it taught him self-sufficiency. The difficult nights, they showed him compassion. The forced silence, it revealed to him the value of the right words at the right time. But the real transformation began when he made the hardest decision of all, to stop pretending he was okay when he wasn't, to start talking about what he felt, to seek help, to let people in, to tear down, brick by brick, those walls he had built with such care. The lessons that only pain teaches. In the 3rd month after the attack, something extraordinary happened. Lucas was in a park, watching the children play, when a boy fell and scraped his knee. The child looked at the injury and began to cry. The mother ran over, cleaned the wound, put on a colorful bandage, and said, "See, now you are braver. Every scar is a story of courage." It was as if a lightning flashed through Lucas's mind. He finally understood. The wounds weren't the problem. The problem was pretending they didn't exist. It was hiding them. It was being ashamed of them. It was letting them fester in the dark instead of bringing them into the light where they could finally heal. He started attending a support group. At first, it was terrifying. Sitting in a circle with strangers and talking about his deepest pains seemed crazy. But in the 2nd week, something magical happened. When he shared his story, he saw tears in the eyes of others. He saw recognition. He saw connection. And he realized that his pain, that thing he believed to be unique and isolating, was actually the bridge that connected him deeply with other human beings. The paradox of vulnerability. Here's a truth that few understand. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's the bravest form of strength that exists. Anyone can build walls. Anyone can wear a mask. But it takes extraordinary courage to present yourself to the world as you really are, wounded, imperfect, in process. Lucas discovered that when he stopped trying to be invincible, he became unassailable. When he stopped pretending he had all the answers, the right answers began to appear. When he admitted he was broken, people showed up with glue, and together they not only repaired the cracks, they transformed them into art. He began working with at-risk youth, boys who, like him, were building walls and swallowing their pain. And to them, he told his story, all of it. The 3 stab wounds, the 10 years of silence, the tears on the cold floor, the slow transformation. And these boys listened to him with an attention that bordered on the sacred, because finally someone was being real with them. The metamorphosis of purpose. At 27, 5 years after that night that could have been his end, Lucas was unrecognizable, not physically, although the scars on his chest were permanent, but internally he had become a completely different man. He had gone back to studying. He was taking psychology at night. He wanted to understand the human mind, the labyrinths of pain, the paths to healing. He wanted to be for others what no one had been for him for so long, a presence, a listener, a bridge. But more important than that, he had learned to love his wounds, not in the sense of liking the pain, but in the sense of recognizing that it was through them that the light entered. It was through the cracks that he finally saw what was on the other side. It was when he was most broken that he discovered what he was really made of. He kept a diary, and on one of the pages, he wrote something that summed up his entire journey. I spent 22 years trying to be indestructible. It took 3 stabs to discover that true strength lies in being rebuildable. It's not about never falling, it's about getting up in increasingly wiser ways. The gift hidden in tragedy. There's an ancient Japanese technique called Kintsugi. When a piece of pottery breaks, instead of discarding it, we're trying to hide the cracks. Artisans fill them with gold. The result? A piece even more beautiful and valuable than it was before it broke. The cracks are not disguised. They're highlighted, celebrated, transformed into art. We're like that, or at least we can be. Lucas began to understand that his wounds were not flaws to be hidden, but marks of battles he had survived. Each scar was evidence that he was stronger than the moments that tried to destroy him. His father's absence, it taught him self-sufficiency. The difficult nights, they showed him compassion. The forced silence, it revealed to him the value of the right words at the right time. But the real transformation began when he made the hardest decision of all, to stop pretending he was okay when he wasn't, to start talking about what he felt, to seek help, to let people in, to tear down, brick by brick, those walls he had built with such care. The lessons that only pain teaches. In the 3rd month after the attack, something extraordinary happened. Lucas was in a park, watching the children play, when a boy fell and scraped his knee. The child looked at the injury and began to cry. The mother ran over, cleaned the wound, put on a colorful bandage, and said, "See, now you are braver. Every scar is